Hi everybody, it's Laura. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Happy Halloween. Today is October 31st and I am creating a layout using the October Shimmerz Paints Color Kitz collection, which is Halloween themed. So I am going to be using a couple of sheets of paper from the collection. I'm also going to make a mixed media background and I'm using a paper issues sketch. So I started off with this really cute paper. I actually used this on the other layout that I made using the October kit because I just love it. I love the little ghosts and it says boo in a couple of different colors on it. So I gutted the paper and I used that along the edge. Then I added a piece of black cardstock from my stash. And then on top of that, I placed a piece of mixed media paper. And for me, mixed media paper is a smooth, very heavy cardstock that I coat with some Liquitex gesso. And I cut that to size so that it would fit right inside of that black mat. I'm also using some of the other pattern papers. Usually I start out with a mixed media background, but on this layout I was thinking that if I layered the pattern papers first, then it would make it a little bit easier for me to know where I wanted to put the mixed media on the background. So I have lots of layers of paper. This is actually a pretty heavy layout. I have that paper in the center that has the really pretty pink color. I love that color pink. And it has the stars on it. And I have that layered on top of the paper that says Ghoul Gang on it. And then behind the pink paper, I'm going to place a white mat. And behind the other paper, the other pattern paper that says Ghoul Gang, I'm going to place a black mat. And that is a good way, I think, to create some contrast between the different pattern papers. And then following along with the sketch, I wanted to have a little piece of paper kind of sticking out from behind the photos. So I took a piece of striped paper. It has thick stripes on it with orange on either side of the black stripes and then some white on either side of the orange stripes. And I cut out a strip of that and then I'm going to mount that on a piece of black paper. Everything has to be mounted. I just really love the way that it creates all that contrast. And then that strip is going to go behind the photos. So I'm using 3 photos on this layout. They all measure 2.5 by 3.5 inches. And all of them were taken at a pet parade. So many years ago, when my family started going to Salem, Massachusetts, we went to a pet parade. I had never seen one before, and we really, really loved it. And so we went for quite a few years. However, we're not going to Salem consistently in October anymore because it just got a little bit too crazy there. And then they only have it on one weekend in October, and we stopped going that same weekend that we used to go to. So we haven't seen it in a couple of years, but it's always just so adorable. There are always people who have dogs and cats, but there are people that have lizards and birds and rabbits, and there are all kinds of pets there, and all the pets get along really well. So it's a really cute experience. So as I was arranging the photos on that pink pattern paper, I was thinking that it's a little bit too big, that it would probably look better overall if I cut that paper down a little bit. So I cut back the pink paper and then the white mat behind it. And then I cut down the other pattern paper rectangle that's behind it. And I cut down the black mat on that too. So now that area is a little bit smaller. And I think that will be better because it'll give me a little bit more background space and I'll be able to create my mixed media background in a slightly larger area. And so now finally everything is cut to the size that I want it to be cut to, and I'm attaching the layers down together. So the next step is to arrange and attach down the photos. And I always like to put the photo that has the most in it in the center, and then the photos that have a little bit more empty space behind the photo that I'm layering on top of it. So here you could see that I have the photo with the 2 dogs in the center, and then the single dogs are on either side because there was a little bit of space to overlap that central photo on. I hope that that makes sense. So I forgot to put that strip down, so I put that down after I attached the dog photos down. And now I'm ready to start my mixed media background. So I drew a pencil line to show me approximately where that whole cluster that I just glued together is going to go on the background. So I start off my mixed media background with a Creameez called My Clementine. And the Creameez is one of the colors that's in the October Color Kitz collection. Now my understanding is that the complete kit has sold out. The pattern papers and the kits that have the papers and the paints, those are no longer available, but you can still purchase the paints that go along with this month's kit. So the Creameez has to be activated with water. So I sprayed some water into the little pan, and then I transferred the paint from the little pan onto my plastic, and now I'm using the packaging technique to squish that color down onto my background. So I'm adding a lot of water, and this is a really pretty shade of orange. It's a lighter orange color. And so I did put down quite a few applications of this color to build the color up a little bit. I really liked this color. I think that it went really well with the color scheme. You could see from the papers that I've been using already on the layout that there's a non-traditional color scheme here. We have a lot of pinks. We have light pink, we have more of a fuchsia pink, and then we also have some orange. And I feel like this color orange really coordinates nicely with the pinks. So often I like to make scary Halloween pages, and I don't have as many materials for cute Halloween. And I think that this works really well with photos of pets dressed up for Halloween. And so I thought that this was just perfect for this particular subject matter. I always like to put just a couple of photos of the pet parade in the album. They're not my pets, so I don't use a whole bunch of them, but when I'm there I get carried away and I take so many pictures, and then in the end I just pick out a couple of them and I make a scrapbook page just to remember the fun that we have when we're there and just how cute all the animals are in their costumes. It's mainly dogs, but there are definitely some other animals there too. Well, on my tabletop, I sprayed some of another orange color that comes with the October Color Kitz collection, which is a Vibez called Punkin Pie. And I am incorporating that into the background as well. I mention this all the time in my videos. I really don't like to use just one shade of a color. When I'm making a mixed media background, I like to use different shades of the same color or different values of the same color so that there'll be some differences and variation in the background. And I definitely think that you can see that in the final results, but it takes a little bit of time to build up that color. So you can see here I'm going back in with more of the My Clementine and adding more applications of color and using a little bit less water so that they'll build up a little bit more quickly. So I often use my heat tool to dry the paint because I'm a little bit impatient. It's also an option to just allow the color to air dry. And I've heard that the color will be more intense if you don't use your heat tool. So I try not to use it as frequently as I used to. It also will buckle the page when you use a heat tool as opposed to letting it dry naturally. It'll still buckle a little bit. So I always run my layouts or my backgrounds through a laminator. I also understand that some people will use an iron to iron them out. I think that's a really great idea too, in case you don't have a laminator. That's something that most people have as an iron and an ironing surface. So that's something you could do to flatten out your mixed media backgrounds because they will buckle a little bit, but like I said, with a heat tool, they buckle a lot more. I've also heard that people recommend that you put your background under something heavy to flatten it out, but I don't have patience for that. I need to make it flat so that I can move on with the layout. So here we have the stencil that was available in the October kit. This is a Simple Stories stencil, and I love this stencil. It's all bats. I'm just really in love with Halloween layouts. I've just had so many crazy things going on lately. It's just one thing after another. My school was switched. I had a problem that went on for quite a while with one of my dogs thank goodness that worked out well. And then more recently, my daughter just needed a lot of help. She was having some difficulty, and it's just been a lot of things that have been going on. And so I'm really happy that I was able to set aside some time to make some Halloween layouts, because they are my favorite kinds of layouts. And get some of these Halloween photos scrapbooked because I have so many of them. So something that I did was I went through one of my Salem, Massachusetts vacations. Vacations usually only last a weekend or so. But I took some sketches that I had that I wanted to use, and I matched them to my photos. And in each of the sleeves of my album, I have the photos and the sketch that I want to use. So I was hoping that that was going to help me to move along more quickly, but sometimes life just gets in the way, and that's okay. They'll still be there when things are hopefully back to normal. I'm not sure when that's going to be, but hopefully it'll be soon. So using the stencil and a palette knife, I added a number of bats to my mixed media background. I used some Crafter's Workshop Marcasite Silver modeling paste, and it's not quite black, but it's dark enough that it looks silvery or kind of almost black. And I didn't use the pattern of the stencil. I slanted the stencil to the right and to the left so that I could feel like the bats were kind of flying around my photo cluster. And then I added some splatters. I added the color splash that was in this month's kit. It's called Black Hole. That was the perfect thing to use to make some black splatters. And then I used some watered down white acrylic paint for some white splatters. And then after I was done adding the white splatters to the background, I cleaned up a little bit of the splattering that I didn't like that went onto the bats. And then I was thinking that it looked kind of funny that there were so many bats on the top and on the side, and I should add some more bats along the bottom. But the mistake that I think that I made was I added them in too much of a straight line going across the bottom. I should have staggered them a little bit more. But I don't think that it really matters, because in the end, some of them get covered up. So I would recommend not putting the bats or anything that you're stenciling in a background in a straight line like that, unless that's your intention. Because everywhere else it looked more random, but then in this spot it looked a little bit too straight. And then once I had added the bats, I was thinking that it would probably bring the pattern papers of the cluster that I'm going to be layering on the top together with the background if I added some pink, because there's so much pink in the pattern papers. So I'm using the brand new color for this month. It's called Pinky Swear, and it's a Shimmerz, and it's that very bright fuchsia color that is the same color as that pink star paper that I used earlier that I layered my photos on top of. And I really liked this addition. I think that adding the pink really added some interest and variation to the background. It just made a big difference to me. And so I decided that since that was a big improvement, I would add the other color of pink that came in the kit. And this one is called Pinko de Mayo. You have to love the names of these colors. And that's also a Shimmerz. So I watered them down, and I'm using one of my bristle brushes to spread them around. And I'm getting the splatters everywhere, and that's okay. I feel like with a mixed media background, the splatters can go all over the place. And then certain types of layouts, like Halloween layouts, I feel like a little bit of a messier background is even better. So after I added the two different colors of pink, I went in with my Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White, and I made a couple of little corrections to some of the bats where I had smeared the modeling paste just to make their wings look a little bit more defined. And I always keep that handy to clean things up and kind of white things out. It's kind of like a artist's whiteout. I learned about this so many years ago when I took a 2-year program in illustration. And this is not the same bottle, but this bottle has lasted me for quite a while. I think it's just a good thing to have on hand. Now my mixed media background is completely dry, and so I'm adding a whole lot of adhesive to the back of it. And this will help it to sit flat on those papers that I've already cut to size that I'm mounting it on. And now I'm ready to attach my cluster down and start embellishing the layout. And I put plenty of adhesive on the back of this cluster too. And it usually doesn't work out that I make a layout like this, but I have to say there is something really nice about creating the mixed media background once you know how large everything is that you're going to layer on top of it. Sometimes I know and sometimes I don't, but I do find that it's nice when I do know, because then I don't have to go back and extend the mixed media once I start layering things on top of it. On this layout, I used a whole bunch of the really cute ephemera pieces that are in the October kit. My title for this layout is going to be one of the ephemera pieces. It says Happy Halloween. Earlier, I added a black mat behind it. I just fussy cut that out around the edge of this ephemera piece, and I place that over the photo that's in the center. Later on, I'm going to straighten out that photo. I was following the sketch and I put it at an angle, but then later on I was thinking that since the title is on top of it, for some reason that made me want to make it straight, so I do that later on. I also have that really cute little cat right on top of the title, and then I'm creating a couple of different clusters. I have 2 clusters with lots of embellishments, one in the upper left-hand corner, one in the lower right-hand corner, and then I also added some strips of jack-o'-lanterns at the top right and then on the bottom left. So I wanted to add a little bit of dimension to the title. I put a little bit of fun foam behind it, and then I tucked that cute little kitty cat right behind the title. And then I was thinking that it might look nice to have 2 of those strips. I got the idea for the first one from the sketch, but then once I started looking at the layout, I thought that just that one strip looked a little lonely, so I decided to add a second one. And I only needed a couple little scraps that I had because so little of it is going to be visible, but just enough, I think, that it adds a nice little touch to the layout. So I also wanted to add some photo corners because I do love photo corners. I love to add photo corners to my layouts. I'm using my EK Success punch here and a couple of strips of pattern paper that were scraps left over from making the page. And I cut out some orange photo corners and some light pink corners, and I used both of those pattern papers on all 3 photos. The photo in the center and the one to the right, they just have 2 photo corners, and then the one on the left has 3 photo corners. Just depends on how many corners were visible on the photo. And then several years ago, in addition to getting into the habit of adding photo corners, I also started adding some kind of a jewel or a dot to the photo corners, usually pretty small ones. For this layout, I'm using some very small black enamel dots. And then I thought that they would also look cute layered over the eyes on the jack-o'-lanterns or pumpkins. I guess they're pumpkins because they're not carved. And I thought that those dots looked really cute. And then I also added some pink enamel dots to the ends or beginnings, I guess, depending on how you look at it, of both of those strips of paper that I used on the layout. And those were the very last touches, and the layout is complete. So here are a few close-ups. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed watching the video. I really appreciate you not only taking the time out of your day to watch it, but to watch it all the way to the very end. And I almost forgot again to say this, but when you place an order with Shimmerz Paints, if you use my name in the comments, you'll receive a free gift. And if you take a look at the links in the description box, you can find out how you can get a subscription to the monthly Color Kitz collection and check out the latest kits. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.